What's up YouTube? It's me again, trying to make some sort of recurrency. Today I want to talk more about Rover. I think I'm creating some sort of DevLog, if that's the name for it. But the idea basically right now is to show some cool stuff that is happening and try to give weekly updates about what's going on. And the thing that I built right now, it's very interesting, something that I was very excited to understand how that would look like at the end, which is the Rover DB and how we work with DB using this concept of code intent and how we could take some sort of advantage where your tooling help you build the things that you want to build and you don't actually struggle with some stuff and try to understand, oh, why is that failing? What's going on here? I think that the best way to do that is showing some code, so let's dive into it. Basically, let's start with the simple thing as possible. Let me just create a main.lua file here and print hello, just so everybody's in the same page. If we run rover run main.lua, then we can just execute. All right, to start work with the DB, the first thing that we do is to actually connect to the DB. So what I'm gonna do here is to create an instance, and then I go Rover DB connect. That's the only thing that we need to connect to DB. One thing that I want to mention right here is that the DB by default is SQLite. I choose SQLite as the first provider because I think the SQLite is very simple. I think something that for the development process is very easy to work with because you just run, you create the file, you can delete. It's very simple to connect. You don't need to set up Docker or anything else to have a DB working for you. By the way, this is not using the default SQLite library, it's using the one provided by Turso. So there's a few things that I am intending to use in the future, but we'll not talk about it right now. We can define a custom path here to where our file will be, but I will not focus on that right now. I'll just use the default one. Let's see how that goes. So when we have the DB, what we can do is we can select, we can go to our table. By this way, our table is like a namespace on the DB. And then we can do something like insert inside that table with the property name, which will be Thales. We can see already that some interesting stuff happening here. We can see that no schema for table users. We will go back to that in a sec, but for now, just remember that that's the way that we insert things in our DB. After that, I want to read for the things that we have in our DB. So let me go like users, and then you do the same thing. We go to our table, and then we say we're gonna find all. After we have all, I just want to print, let me see, I'll just print everything. So let me just do a regular for loop here as we have in Lua. So e equals 1, yes, arrays start with 1, which is the right way, by the way. If you're not agree with that, there's nothing I can do. Anyway, then we go local user equals users at this point, then we can just print the user.name. I'll just put something here to visualize better, and I will concat actually. Okay, so let's pay attention what's going on here. We have written just this, we connected to our DB, we inserted something, then we are grabbing everything that we have and we are printing, and that's all. Let's run it and see what happens. I'm just cleaning my terminal here. And let's run rover run main.lua. At the moment we do that, we have some interesting stuff happening here. The first thing is that rover check runs by default and tells us that there's no schema for table users, which is correct. We just wrote some code and we haven't created anything yet. But then we have the table users inferred from code. So we understand that we have a name that's inferred from the insert, and the ID is something auto-generated, which is a default from Rover DB. Then it asks if you want to create a schema for that. And yes, I do want to create a schema. Do I want to run a migration for that? No, I don't want the migration at this moment, because I want to take a look at the schema itself. So I just say no, it aborted, nothing happens, so I can take a look. We have these Rover DB schemas to look at, so let's take a look. Basically what we have is a schema for our table users, and here, very important, we are using guards, the same guards that we have for validation stuff we can use in DB, but not exactly the same, because they are under the DB namespace, which provide then some stuff like primary, auto, nullable, some more things that we could use that are more DB related stuff and not just guards that are being used for validation in all scenarios. Okay, let me run that again And now it says that no migration found, which is correct. We have said no for the migration. So let's say yes. And yes, I want to run the migration. Cool, migration run it, and then that was already executed. If I run that again, you may imagine that every time I run it, it is increasing because I haven't put any validation, but the DB is there. I can prove it by running the SQLite at the rovers.SQLite, which is the default, and then we can do here tables. We can see that we have users, which is the table that we just created, and we can do select from users, and we can see all the same thing that we have added here. Pretty cool, isn't it? Next thing, let's see what happens when we open the file again. And you guys can see here that there's no warning anymore related to the DB. Like, why is that happening? Because the schema now exists. And what happens in Rover is that based on your intention, when you just write this code, we then created something that is the schema, and that has the schema based on the things that you describe it there. And now Rover understands that, okay, if I have a schema, then I know that that exists. And look at this. If I try to access now, I have an IntelliSense saying that I have a table called users, so I can use it for anything that I want. I think that's fantastic. I think that's very neat to use because I can write some code that has no types. I know which fields I have to use in my table, and things are connected in a way that the tool itself helped me to build those stuff instead of I need to do a bunch of things manually, or I need to use some sort of different tooling. Understand? Oh, I know that there's a bunch of frameworks that uses some CLI to scaffolding some stuff, but I don't know, for me, sometimes this scaffolding doesn't help that much because there's a bunch of codes that I need to delete, and sometimes for me it's just easier to just say that I want a table that has these values inside. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's say that I want to add a new field here. Let's say that now I want to use the age as well, and the age is 26, which is my age, by the way. Look what happened. A no field. If we see better the diagnosis, it says a no field age on table users and insert. Valid fields, just ID and name. That's correct. We haven't done anything yet with it to make sure that this exists. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna run Rover again, and then we have the diff understanding, okay, I know that the schema exists, but I noticed that you want to access this one. Do you want to update the schema? Yes, I do. Do you want a new migration for that schema? Yes, I do. Let's run the migration. Now look what happened here. Error, migration failed. Migration SQLite failed. Is query error. Cannot add a not null. I can improve this error, okay? Cannot add a not null column with default value null. Why that happened? Let's take a look at our migration, what's going on. So let's go to the B, migrations. And then what happened here is that we are adding a new column called age. And then, oh, I forgot to mention that migrations, by the way, they have something very similar to how Elixir does stuff, the Acto package does stuff, where we have the change, and we can also define an up or down methods. Basically, up when we run the migration up, down when you run the roll down. Change is something automatically that understands that can be understood like if we are doing something to this direction, then we can just run the rollback. It will really change the opposite. So like the add column would remove column, create table, drop table, and so on. So what I want to do here, this is an integer that I want, but I want that integer to be nullable. I want to explicitly say that this can be nullable because the older migration, if we take a look at the previous migration, doesn't have an age, and we don't specify how do we want that to be managed. We can also do that in our schema just to make sure things are fine, so nullable. And then that's it. So now when I run Rover again, table user says no column named age. Okay, let's run Rover DB rollback, and then let's Rover DB migrate again. There's a chance I did something wrong here. There's some room for improvement. As I said, there's stuff that I'm building. Oh, that's a good opportunity to just say that Rover DB status has status of how our migrations are. So if I do like Rover DB rollback, it's rolled back. The last is boundary for the Rover DB status. We have here how is the status of our migrations. So let's just Rover DB migrate again. Rover DB status. We can understand the status of our migrations. Rover run main.lua, name.Thales, which is fine. Since I accidentally run a rollback for everything, I lost the things that I did at the beginning, but you guys grabbed the idea. Probably there are some mistakes that I need to improve the migration process. But anyway, that's the whole thing, how that works. If we need some docs for that, we can access the official Rover docs, which is on complex.com. Then we can just say at the docs here, it's a work in progress, please don't judge me. Let's see here, we have the database, so we can take a look. And we have our guards here that we can understand when something's required, when it's default. Like, there's a bunch of ways of how we could define our schemas, how we can extend, and a bunch of different stuff that it's very interesting in my opinion. Anyway, let's get moving. So, all right, once we have it, let's take a look again in our Lua file. One cool thing that I want to show right now is also, I mean, we have insert, we have updates, we have a bunch of things, but I want to show the way that we can filter stuff because this is something very interesting. I took that inspiration from how JPA does stuff. I know probably most of the people that watch these videos are not familiar with the Java world, but in Java, JPA is something that is an ORM and it is inferred all the methods that we could use for filtering, for doing a bunch of stuff. It's inferred based on the schemas, and we have something similar. So basically, if I type by to find by something, I have all the possible names and fields and everything else. Like if you have that, of course, there is room for improvement, but like the age, I have the age, and I can check like the age is smaller than. Not equals. Anyway, we can have a bunch of infrared types here based on the schema that we just created. And one cool thing, if we try to do, let's say by email, right? We have it to understand that the email filter doesn't exist because I'm trying to filter by something that we did not create it yet. So what we can do, we could just say here that I want to filter by email. I want the email to be like thales@email.com. Let's save it. Again, when we run Rover, Rover understands that I am trying to access something that doesn't exist. So if for some reason I typed something wrong, I know by hand that this doesn't exist, that I need to do something with that. Or like in this case, if I know for sure that I know what I'm doing, then I can just say yes and say, okay, let's create this field email for me. But in this case, I don't want to do nothing, just to really show an example of what we can do. But basically we can just say by name, and then I can say Thales, and of course I will remove all, but that in this case I'm just gonna grab only the first. Let's just say here, actually, let me keep that. Let's run Rover. Of course that would return Thales, but let's just insert something else. Let me just open the file again. I will just put any other name here. John, age 40, I don't know. I can run it, and as you guys can see, it will always return Thales. If I try to open the SQLite and select all users, as you can see, we have the John and Thales and everything here, and the filter is actually working. I think that's pretty much it. That's the way how I imagine that we could do some stuff for the DB. There's a bunch of other stuff that I can show here, but there's a bunch of things that actually need more improvement. But I think that this idea that I can start to type the things that I want to type, and then when I run, the tooling will help me build everything. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat actually, because I can focus on my code. I can do the things the way that I wanted to do. I have some sort of convention happening here because, like in the example that I showed earlier, like if we have a server, right? Because that's probably the most of the way that we would use that. We have a Rover server, right? And then we return that server. We can do stuff like we can have a function that defines the server that posts something, and then we can go here, we can have our DB, and then doing everything that we would do. We can create a scaffolding for that. There's no problem to create a scaffolding for that. But I want to say is that sometimes, at least for me, it's easier to write just the things the way that I want it to do. And then the tooling is just like the guidance to do all the stuff that I would have to do manually sometimes, but be faster. Let me know, guys, if you like the idea or if you think, oh, that's a terrible idea. Of course, there are edge cases that I still need to cover. I haven't tested all the features that I have in my mind yet. I haven't tested like big complex queries yet. I have some idea, I have something built, but there's something yet that I still need to improve in that field. So yeah, I think that's it. Don't forget, please do leave a comment. What are your thoughts around that? To go to the repository and leave some stars if you like the project. And that's it. I hope in the next one to show more cool stuff. I'm not sure that will be related to the DB because I'm doing some stuff in parallel. Sometimes I start to do UI stuff. Sometimes I start to do some DB stuff. There's some WebSocket stuff that I'm really interested about doing. And yeah, I think that's it. See ya.